lunch session here, and it's certainly, as I mentioned earlier, it's great to be in Chattanooga. And Chattanooga has such a rich history of doing great things in this city and this county, and been very blessed actually as a community to be led by so many great leaders. With us today is no exception. We have Mayor Tim Kelly, Chattanooga Mayor, and Mayor Weston Wamp with us today, and super excited to have a conversation with them about what's going on in this community. And as you all know, there's a lot going on. In fact, in the southeast part of the state, Southeast Tennessee, since Governor Lee's taken office, we've announced 50 projects, just over 8,000 net new jobs, with a $3.5 billion CapEx among those 50 projects. That's remarkable work, and something that I know that you all are very excited about. We're certainly excited about. And the great news is that there's a lot of interest in this region from all over the country, all over the world. And we'll talk a little bit today about why that's the case. And you'll certainly hear more about it here today, later today, and tomorrow as well. Before I invite the mayors to come up, I do want to recognize our team here. Our department has 9 regions across the state, and this region is led by Sam Wills. I think many of you know Sam here with us today, and supported by Anissa Ingram and Hannah Young, part of our ECD local team. Thank you, Sam and Anissa and Hannah, for all the great work and your partnership with not only the local leadership here, but certainly our department as well. Also just want to say thanks again to the city of Chattanooga, Hamilton County, for hosting us. Also just always like to do this because I know they're working their tails off, but the staff that are supporting this, the servers that are here, thank you all for making this, turning it around very, very quickly. So thank you all. Thank you to the staff at the hotel as well, the conference. Thank you. My first mayor I'll introduce is Weston Wamp. I met Weston many years ago through venture capital. Basically, I think that's my background, 20+ years in it, and through lots of deals and opportunities to work together, we met, and I know his dad as well, and he's obviously been a friend, and really excited about all the work that he's not only doing in a short time as mayor, but what he will do going forward. Perhaps the most exciting thing, however, is that he and his wife just added to their family a 5th child. You've caught up to me. Congratulations. As of Friday. So glad he's here. As you all know, there's a lot going on in the House, but glad he's here. Mayor Tim Kelly of Chattanooga, somebody that I met recently is coming in with the governor's administration. I know this city is very grateful to have a leader who's been just planted here, very involved in the business community, automotive, family business, and a lot of nonprofits, very involved from a community standpoint. Decided to run for mayor, and here we are. So we've got, what I see is just you got 2 very dynamic leaders working together. In fact, while we were at lunch, y'all were doing business here and working out some things, which is great. I don't even think, Mayor Kelly, I don't think you even ate, did you? You were just going. So it's my honor to have them. I'm going to just step over here, and we're just going to kind of walk into some Q&A. But thank you all for that, and thank you, mayors, for being here with us today. Okay. Yeah, I'm on. Good. This is working. Thank you, guys. This is to both of you, and a great way to kick it off. So, our theme is economic development, and I know that you all have a couple big projects in place, and you've got sort of shared priorities, the county and the city, when it comes to the Bend, which I got to tour recently, which is a very exciting project, and the One West Side plan. So, Mayor Kelly, I'll kind of kick it off to you. Let's just talk about what those shared priorities are for those 2 projects in particular.
Well, thank you, Stuart, and thank you for being here, and thank you again for choosing Chattanooga for this conference. I hope I'll give Charles Wood, our Chamber of Commerce head, credit for the weather, but it's hopefully you guys have a fantastic time here. So we'll start with that. But look, the Bend, the fact is that this Chattanooga area, for the longest time had one of the worst longitudinal growth rates of any part of the state. It was not a place that enjoyed a lot of investment, and the Bend is a large area down on the west side. If you're not from Chattanooga, hopefully you can go and see it. Big brown field that used to house combustion engineering and then was sold a number of times since then. It's in the federal opportunity zone, and if you know anything about economic development, you know it has to have been a fairly depressed area to even qualify.
Right.
So again, it gives us the opportunity to partner on an incredible opportunity, not only to create a whole new, really a neighborhood downtown with great retail and mixed-use development and great commercial potential, but also in the creation of a tax increment financing district, create a big down payment to help us get a Choice Neighborhoods grant to rebuild one of Chattanooga's oldest public housing developments and diversify that development. So it's a really exciting project.
Mayor Wamp, anything you want to add to that?
Well, we had a lot of fun doing it together. He beat me into office by about a year, and this was we saw it coming in our first few months serving together, and it really we're able to partner with a visionary developer in a way that by the time we presented it to the community, felt like the citizens of the city and of the county and the developer had their interests all represented and aligned in a special way. I think 20 years ago, and a lot of y'all were at a conference like this one 20 years ago, when economic development in a state like ours was about recruiting jobs so that people weren't unemployed. And now economic development in a place like Tennessee, where there's a rush, particularly in manufacturing, to get here, it's about creating communities where we all want to live, and where out of economic development we're building awesome quality of life, and that's a huge change. That's what I think the Bend reflects, is a lot of stuff he cares most about, stuff I cared most about. There's a consistency in being able to campaign and talk about things, and then not go negotiate an economic development deal with a developer where they just get the money they need to do what they want to do.
Right.
That's a part of our capitalistic system, and people, voters, citizens appreciate it and understand that's a component of a deal. But what we came in and said is that the city really was prioritizing affordable housing. We were trying to focus on workforce development oriented public education, and what a cooler spot to do it than immediately west of our downtown on this legacy manufacturing site, where we have a vision and even a working agreement with the developer that a school that we'll talk about here in a minute that's adjacent will be funded in part by the growth and development at the Bend. But I think as importantly, it'll give us an economic development tool that none of the rest of y'all have, in that we'll have hopefully it was meant to set the standard, but that this school will have the potential to partner with employers of frankly a wide variety that end up, Stuart, that you end up landing at the Bend.
Well, and let me just add to that, again, historically in Chattanooga, I know it's not the case everywhere, our school systems merged about 25 years ago, and since that time the city really hasn't been involved. But again, I see education, and Mayor Wamp and I are 100% lockstep on this as the primary building block of economic development. So I'm happy to partner with the county and the school system to help fund that, to help fund it.
And one thing the audience may not know, but the Bend is what's the size of that project, acreage-wise?
A little over 100 acres.
Yeah, 100 acres.
The core of it, but it's considerably larger.
It's larger, as generally speaking. Millions of square feet that the overall master plan is for that. If I remember correctly, the one west side is literally like, how close is it right there to the Bend?
It's across the street.
It's across the street. So, that's what struck me when I was touring, is how close the proximity. You've got two, significant projects going on, and you've got the ability to locate business. You've got some multifamily, so people can work, live, and play there. But also, you've got this affordable housing component to that. Maybe talk just briefly about how all of a sudden somebody had a vision for this to sort of bring these two together. Expand on the affordable housing side. I'll kind of direct it to you, Mayor Kelly. Just, what other opportunities besides the Bend do you see, in particular with, whether it's One West Side or other affordable housing type opportunities?
Okay. Well, let me just say, I guess everybody in the room probably knows at this point that affordable housing is an issue. It's an issue across the state, and it's an economic development issue. Currently in the city of Chattanooga, starting out, our police, firefighters, teachers, not to mention servers, hotel workers can't afford to live in the city of Chattanooga. And that is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Politically, economically, it's not, right? We are working very hard. We have a housing action plan now and a chief housing officer for the first time in the city's history to help address this through market mechanisms, right? We're not going to mandate affordable housing, but we need to get really creative, and our housing action plan does get quite creative about how to do that. The One West Side development is really exciting in particular because it'll not only replace one for one all the public housing, which again is on the lower end of the AMI scale,
right,
but also diversify that development with more mixed use and mixed income, and add another 1,000 units.
How many units total in the?
So I think about 1,600 total.
Yeah.
And then of course there will be an affordable housing component. Again, this audience probably knows that when we say affordable housing, we don't just mean public housing. We mean anything essentially below 100% annual median income, right? Average. So workforce housing is a really, really important part of this, and our plan is quite robust. It's 100 pages. If you need to get to sleep tonight, it's available online. You can download it and read it. But no, it's a very technical toolbox of how we're going to solve this problem, but we are determined to solve it.
Yeah. And so, Weston, you talked about education, public education. Talk a little bit about what you've been working on and how that impacts not only sort of this project, but even beyond that.
Well, and just to be clear, when we talk about aligning the interests of the developer with the priorities of the people of our community, what that really looks like is that we took a pretty fine pin to how the increment would be split up in this TIF. And so the developer's getting a chunk, but frankly, it's not a huge chunk relative to what will be invested into housing on the city side and into education. And at maturity, the site will generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million for public education. So we've got a tradition here of holding education, the education portion of property taxes, harmless in TIFs and pilots. We've done that, but then in addition to it, depending on what full build out ends up looking like, there's a novel, at least first in my lifetime, partnership between the city and the county. And then we also set aside, as state law requires us to, a portion of the TIF for debt service. So a portion of the increments go into debt service, and when you add it all up, that number could end up ballooning to $350+ million into public education, and it just so happened, we couldn't have written it this way, but Blue Cross Blue Shield over the winter months decided to sell an iconic 11 acres right downtown, backs right up to West Side. Right. It's a quarter of a mile to the Bend. We had been looking for a downtown campus to make a generational investment into career and technical education. This community led the state for decades, really got away from it over the last couple decades, and it was a priority of both of ours that we wanted to see that happen, and the school superintendent was aligned. And so right at the same time that we're negotiating the Bend, the county is able to acquire this 11-acre, it's a great legacy structure called the Golden Gateway here in Chattanooga. So there's nearly 200,000 square feet that we're going to get to renovate into a school. Meanwhile, we're negotiating the Bend, recognizing that the proximity couldn't have worked out better. And that's the partnership where we see between the school system and the county and the developers, where, when we toured Commissioner McWhorter through the site, we told him, as you go out, fishing on behalf of the state of Tennessee, one of the more unique propositions is that you could end up on the Tennessee River in this Bend development. And if you're facing unusual challenges in workforce development, a quarter of a mile down the road, in between our downtown core and the Bend, is this major investment we're making into career and technical education.
Yeah, and that'll be, talk a little bit more about the actual school itself. What is the plan, the types of things that will be brought in curriculum-wise, the students that will come in, just a little bit more about what that vision is.
Yeah. So the little geography lesson for those of you who aren't here, the city of Chattanooga is mostly the southwest quadrant of the county. The downtown Chattanooga is even further into the southwest. But we envision the school being, and it sits right on the main artery, Highway 27 going north, 35 miles before you'll exit Hamilton County going north. And so our vision is that the school would be open to students from across the county, that there would be a magnet component. Certainly, we would expect a higher concentration of students from the city. And what we want to do is build out robust partnerships with corporate partners, some of them being companies that are locating at the Bend, others that are downtown. We envision afternoon, co-op type experiences where students would walk or take a bus, just blocks away downtown. And what we're in the early stages of planning out, the superintendent and I, is that we envision that school setting the bar in a different way in career and technical. I think everybody in this room certainly is the consensus in the education world that we've got to reinvest in career and technical in a way that dignifies it. We can't talk about the college kids one way and the career and technical kids the other way, and now incomes of people who've pursued the building trades justify that. Well, what we're talking about doing is going a step further, and that campus really being an innovative place of learning where you have under the same roof kids, some of our absolute best and brightest traditional students and best and brightest non-traditional students under the same roof, having lunch in the same cafeteria, but some may be ready to go to work at 18, some may be in the first year of a 7-year higher education journey. But we think it's really meaningful in a bar we want to set. And by the way, it would allow us to train some of Volkswagen's employees of the future, and you may also have people who get started on a health sciences path who end up being physicians.
Yeah. So from our perspective, what's so exciting about the project itself, whether it's the Bend itself, affordable housing, or the school, you're talking about workforce, you're talking about livability. When I've been down here to Chattanooga a bunch, and it's a city that is ready for, companies and industry to come closer into the core. And it's exciting when you see these, because these are the kinds of things that have to happen in order to attract the industry and consider even making those types of investments. So I applaud you all, both of you, for your engagement. So sort of into the next segue here, our department works very closely with local leaders, whether that's elected officials or chambers of commerces, et cetera. In this case, you have two mayors, have a chamber of commerce. We have the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, UT system itself. It's very supportive. We've got our technical schools, EPBs here, which is a great asset as part of the city. So, sort of to both of you, but how do you? My experience has been it's very well coordinated. So I talk to you all myself a lot about opportunities. We have many of our partners and your teams here in the audience. But when we're calling you up or you're calling us up with opportunities, sort of walk us through that process. You probably have obviously your own individual ways of doing it, but from an economic development standpoint, just talk a little bit about how you engage in businesses and vice versa.
Well, look, I mean, as a business guy myself, my theory of change is economic, right? I think a lot of mayors come from a legal background. Maybe the theory of change is, we're gonna pass laws and make the world a better place. Mine is fundamentally economic. And again, we got a lot of work to do here to close gaps in Chattanooga. If you look at the demographics, frankly, again, the painful stuff that we don't talk enough about is the disparities here are still very real. But if we're gonna fix it, it's going to be through economics. It's going to be through job creation and raising incomes, which starts with education. So look, I mean, that's why I ran, that's why I'm in the job. I think, in terms of, Chattanooga's got a long history of public-private partnership, and that's really just a fancy word for saying we communicate well. I think we have a really great long history of communicating well, staying on the same page, and setting aside our egos for the greater good. Right? I do think there's something kind of different about Chattanooga, and it's probably true of every part of the state except perhaps Nashville, with apologies to Nashville and Nashvillians, in that we are scattered in the four corners of the state. And here, we've never gotten a lot of love, a lot of sunlight, Atlanta certainly isn't our friend. We count on Nashville to make sure we're not forgotten, but we've kind of had to always figure things out for ourselves here in Chattanooga. And so I think that helps keep us on the same page.
Yeah. Fair.
There's an incredible entrepreneurial history here. I think on our best day, we channel a little bit of that into government, which isn't easy, but it's doable. In local government, you can take an entrepreneurial aggressiveness and even some of the conversations I think we're going to get to before we're done here are about our predecessors getting pretty creative from government positions and leading. I think Tim and I have the advantage of knowing just about every business leader here before we came into office. So we're big enough that we've made our mark. Always been a town since the Civil War that's punched above its weight class, and still do. The county has a pretty unique arrangement with the Chamber of Commerce, running one of the largest business incubators, one of the largest public business incubators in the world. And that's a project that I think we've talked to the city about partnering in as we envision the future of the North Shore and that site being a beehive of entrepreneurial activity, and making sure that entrepreneurial activity is happening not just among white guys like Tim and I, who had a lot of different advantages, but in a community where our public school system is now majority minority students. The supports for people trying to start a business ought to look different. But at the end of the day, our calling card is creative people finding their way here. And it's been our calling card for a long time, for a century. Creative people finding their home here and starting a company. And so as much as we're grateful to the big corporate citizens who have come here, our future, I think, is in the success of those small businesses. And many of the conversations we have with them are recognizing that so many of our companies get to a certain point and they begin to have workforce issues that are created in this community by a public school system that has challenges, particularly in some parts of the county. And so as we shore those up, I think the sky's the limit.
What would be, you think about the pitch whether it's a business or whether it's just say it's a family that is looking to move to the region. What would you, what's the pitch that you would say, here's why Chattanooga should be your place of choice?
It's funny, I'm going to tell a little story. Some of you might know Mike Costa. Mike used to run a television station, Sinclair outlet here. He moved away to Montgomery, came back, took a pay cut, and we had, we talked about it, and he just, and you hear this over and over again about Chattanooga, but Mike said, and I wrote this down, I'm still working on, we need to work it into a slogan for the city, but I said, why, Mike? Why are you back? And he said, there's more to life. And I said, well, that's pretty much it, right? I mean, there are a lot of people in Chattanooga who could be somewhere else making a lot more money, but I think it really does come to quality of life overall, like great place to raise a family, great place to live, and then we saw that during COVID, right? I mean, we had a lot of people that moved here over the transom. Which was very frustrating for us because we didn't know, if you recruit a company, you can go talk to the CEO and meet the employees. This was not that.
That's right.
And still bumping into people who just kind of showed up. But it really is an extraordinary place, and you hear it over and over again from people who come here and stay, despite what, the sort of objective economics. Now, again, my job is to catch the economics up to the reality. And again, as I've said many times, people come here and say, it reminds me of Austin 30 years ago. Well, my job is to keep it Austin 30 years ago. That's the tricky part, right? It is a Goldilocks problem to a great extent.
Yeah.
What is it they say about Austin? Keep Austin weird was always their mantra.
Yeah.
There's more of that here than some people may realize, and I've always felt that. I'm the county mayor, but like Tim, a son of the city, and have spent almost my whole life, save a few years at UT here. I look at the picture, I think, it's right behind us. I mean, so that's actually our city. That's not like edited or some
Yeah.
You know, you didn't
Not Photoshop.
You didn't catch a magical moment. That's what it always looks like, and it always has looked that way. I mean, that's what people. So white settlers came right to that same vantage point, and we're looking at the Cherokee Nation. So everything south of the Tennessee there, looking down at Lookout Mountain, that was all the Cherokee Nation through almost the mid-1850s, and or through the middle of the 19th century. And so some of this we're not responsible for. Like, that's just how this place looks, and it's how it lives. So there are mountain communities here. Not a mountain community. There's several different mountain communities. Pick one 10 minutes from town, 15 minutes from town, another one 20 minutes from town, another one 25 minutes from town. We also, you know, different than the cities that are thought to be our peers, we have just about everything that you want here, but if it's not here, you're an hour and a half or 2 hours in a car to Atlanta or Nashville, which, like my wife and I love city life, but part of the beauty of living in Chattanooga is there's two international destinations, one south, one west.
Yep.
So, you know, part of this is you come and spend a few days in Chattanooga, and that's the best way we can sell ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, and I would say, you know, from our perspective, the things that we talk about often from our department is all the things you mentioned, you know, and then you dig a little deeper and you think, I see it up on the wall there, EPB, and, you know, what's going on with quantum, and that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of, there's cities that can't claim that. With UTC here, you know, the growth that they're having, was sitting with Chancellor Engel here at lunch. I mean, they're having record applications and enrollment. They got the support of the UT system. Logistics. I mean, we talked about this the other night. The history of just the logistics industry in Chattanooga is rich. You know, there's some serious players that had, you know, started many decades ago in that space. And you just think logistically where you are, it's kind of a no-brainer, quite frankly. So, you know, I think about how we partner in the state of Tennessee. You know, I think about Knoxville as a peer, how you learn and grow together, not so much as a competitor, but, you know, across state lines, I look at places like Huntsville. Mm-hmm. You know, nothing wrong with Huntsville, but, you know, we're going to do everything we can to try to win there. So how do you know, if there's opportunities to compete, let's just say it's a Huntsville, what are some of the things you try to differentiate yourself? Because there's some pretty cool things happening there. So what do we need to do? Maybe the better question is, what do we need to do to make sure that we can win those opportunities for the right opportunities?
Well, I think it starts with going to school. You know, again, I've got a good friendship now and a healthy rivalry with Tommy Battle down in Huntsville, the mayor. I've been down there a time or two. He's been up here a time or two to kind of size each other up.
Right.
And it is a bit of kind of through a glass darkly with Huntsville. I mean, they've got some massive advantages with government investment and so on. They've got, you know, again, air service is one where I think we're behind, where we need to catch up. But you know, and their economic development, their chamber and their airport are on the same page. They've done, you know, we're still politically, I wouldn't say wrestling mightily, but wrestling with the public in terms of what a TIF is and why it's important. They've already done a number of TIFs to fund new schools and things of that nature. And so, you know, listen, I'm a huge fan of Promethean theft, right? I mean, I'm willing to learn from anybody at any time about anything. And they have a lot to teach us. And again, Greenville, South Carolina famously did this to us. Again, not sort of putting value judgments on the historical trajectory of this community, but there was a time when Greenville was well behind us. They came here and went to school, went back and did their homework, and now I think most people would tell you Greenville is where we are, if not beyond us, right? So I think it starts with going and seeing.
Sure. There.
Well, I've been here about this one. I think as we chart the future and make big bets on quantum and you know, see what sticks, we ought not forget that we do have this almost unrivaled background in the logistics industry. I mean, that river was navigated for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There's been a lot of commerce on it. It's no secret to anybody who lives here that 3 interstates converge right here, and we've got a lot of traffic as a result, but there's also more freight that passes through here. And to the point you were making, I mean, just one family, and there's so many families who've had an impact in the logistics industry, but just one family 2 generations ago started one of the first really large-scale commercial carriers running east to west. The second generation in that family then started what was widely known as the most innovative carrier of the 90s and early 2000s, U.S. Express. The third generation in that family has created the data platforms that serve the whole logistics industry, and now are doing some of the most fascinating things in the aviation industry, particularly in general aviation. And so, to see that through line, it harkens back to our entrepreneurial legacy, but it also, we have as much advantage in that logistics industry. The weird thing is it's not a very sexy industry. It's not a terribly easy one to understand if you've not been in it, but whether it's warehousing, we've become a 3PL capital of the country. So freight brokerage happens here per capita at a level it doesn't anywhere else in America. So leaning into those things we've done real well, plus this quality of life, I think is how we succeed.
Yeah, and with logistics, again, this audience knows this. Many communities that are represented here have benefited with this onshoring of manufacturing. And so when you think about logistics, I would imagine, honestly, that, and obviously that Chattanooga is going to play a significant role in that, in moving product, whether it's locally or across the country. What are some other, I think this is just an interesting conversation just to think about emerging technology or knowledges that are in this local community that you think the audience needs to know about?
Take that one first. Okay.
You take a step.
Well, the obvious one is the kind of elephant in the room is quantum, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so quantum, I don't, and again, it's a buzzword. You've all heard it, but I mean, we've spent a lot of time with it and unpacking it. And so for those of you that don't know, I think there's a panel on this later. I know there is because I'm on it. But our, EPB, our fiber provider here, was the first municipal fiber provider, I guess, in the United States, and the fastest for the longest time. It's a huge asset that is a city asset, and they are an incredible accelerator for our economic development here. Because they have long, dark strands of fiber, we can do experimentation with quantum and sending qubits, photons, basically, across this fiber in a way that only is possible currently. The Chinese government in China are the only other place where this is even possible. So the scale of potential for that technology here, not only for the hardware side of it, but for the software side, quantum computers won't be programmed like normal computers. It is, and I've said this before, potentially the single greatest economic development opportunity the city's ever seen.
Yeah.
And so that's the big one.
See, I wasn't going to answer that one first because I could tell where it was going. And I got a counterpart here who's got degrees from Emory and Columbia. And so if we're going to be explaining quantum stuff, I'm proud of my Tennessee degree, but I'll leave some of this heavy tech to him. I think there's other places in Tennessee I'm sure that do. I can't think of a better place in America to capture and we already have captured a lot of the unique and not totally understood opportunities in work from home. If you can work just about anywhere or work from just about anywhere, I can't imagine a still relatively affordable, incredibly high quality of life place to do it. And so, even the conversations we both come from entrepreneurial, and we both have dabbled in and out of venture-backed stuff. And some of my closest friends are running a really fascinating, world-class venture-backed incubator here. And I think that's what they continue to see as a place where we can compete with anybody. Is in small teams. Could be here, one-off. We saw during COVID, one-off members of some of the biggest development teams in the country choosing to live here because they can. Mm-hmm. And I think a place like Chattanooga could actually do that at scale. It happens one at a time, but I think it's a pretty good strategy for us.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting time here. I think one of the reasons why we made Chattanooga a place to do our conference is to try to highlight some of the interesting things that are happening here, not only currently, but what we think the future is for not only just Chattanooga, but this region. There's a lot going on here. I can promise you, we're seeing it in our department. I know the governor's going to be here tomorrow. He'll talk a little bit about his excitement about it as well. But anyway, congratulations to both of you. Thank you for your leadership, first and foremost, and certainly your time, Weston, for being here. You got a little one at home now, so we appreciate you taking a minute to come spend some time. This will conclude our Q&A, or our little chat, and we'll conclude. And we've got sessions throughout the afternoon. Don't forget about our evening reception later on this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.